Hello, everybody. Welcome to the third session of seafood canning technology. In the previous sessions, we have already discussed that to explain the canning technology, we have to divide it into three concepts, like the actual concept, the container, and the process. So, in the initial sessions, we have discussed regarding the concept. So, in this session, we will be dealing with the container, and especially the containers used for canning and their properties. So, what will be an ideal container for canning? So, there are different properties assigned for a material to be qualified as a good or ideal container to be used as a proper container for canning technology. So, the foremost property or the one of the premium property that we are looking for is like basically its physical strength. So, the container should be basically strong enough to protect the contents as well as to survive the handling and transportation. So that is one of the key feature that the material should possess so that it will qualify as a ideal container for canning. So next, the process is that after the physical strength should be light enough for easy and economic handling. So the weight of the container by the use of that particular material is going to ultimately decide the transportation cost and the product cost, etc. So it should be light enough, and also it should be like any other good food packaging material. It should be impervious to air, moisture, dust, and microbes once it is sealed. So usually, like, most of the products are properly packed inside a particular container or a packaging filling, but in most cases these containers are not 100% foolproof. Like, they may be permeable to different kinds of matters or different kinds of materials such as moisture. It can be, some of the materials can be permeable to light, different kinds of gas permeabilities are there. So these kind of permeabilities are a challenge for the seafood processing industry, because eventually once the food is packed and sent for shelf life or self storage, these kind of permeability can ultimately affect the quality of the food over the period of time. Since the canned products or the products prepared using tanning technology are supposed to be stored at the room temperature, the permeability of the container is very important. So it should be impervious to all that air, moisture, and such elements, so that the food inside the container can be preserved under the room temperature for a quite long time. So that is one quality that we are looking for. And also the appearance of the container or the appearance of the material is also one of the key features, because the appearance should be pleasing and sanitary. Because one of the key features which should be possessed by consumer products is that once in the shelf or the commercial area or the marketing area or the shop, once it is displayed on the shelf, and it should attract the consumers to buy it. So the surface should be sanitary and hygienic enough so that it should give a sanitary feel for the consumer. So that sanitary and clean feel is one of the important. So it should be pleasing and sanitary in appearance. That is one quality that we are looking. And also it should not be harmful, or it should not import any toxicity into the content. So that particular property is called migration. So the material that is used for preparing the particular packaging that is going to be used for canning should not impart any additional constituents into the food. For example, in the case of many plastic packaging materials, these are having a lot of chemical constituents which over the period of time may leach into the food and make the food toxic or unacceptable for human consumption. So that is one of the property that we should be aware about, because it should not have any migratory property. So that is one of the features that we are looking for. And also it should withstand the pressure and temperature of thermal processing. As we know, thermal processing is a severe process. So it is basically thermal sterilization. So especially in the case of canning, we are subjecting the food package high temperatures up to the level of 121.1 degrees Celsius, and also pressure up to 15 to 20 psi of pressure. These are the two extreme conditions which we are going to make the containers exposed to. Such materials should be used for such containers so that the container should withstand the process. It should not break or it should not burst after the actual processing is done. So that is one of the properties. And also at the same time, it should be inexpensive to discard after use. So discarding the food packaging is one of the important challenge that is being currently faced by the food industry, because especially the plastic packaging, after opening the container and after consuming the product, the what is left is the plastic packaging material, which if not properly recycled or properly handled, it can be released into the environment and can cause different kinds of plastic pollution issues. So should not happen in the case of canning. So that property, it also should be inherent to the material that we are going to use for canning. So it should be inexpensive at the same time, and it should be like discard friendly. It should be easily recycled and reusable. So that is one of the properties. And finally, one of the most important properties that the material should be capable of hermetic sealing using high speed machines. So sealing property, different kinds of sealing methods are there, which we will be discussing eventually. But the ability to close the container airtight is one of the key features that we are looking for canning. And also it should be sealable using machines, so that the process should be entirely automated. So the machines can be involved and the sealing should be perfect, because otherwise the productivity will be reduced. If we can seal it only manually, then that will significantly reduce the rate of production. So these are the key features that we are actually looking into a container, an ideal container which could be used for canning. So if we try to generally classify different kinds of containers that could be used for thermal processing, so it could be generally classified into three categories. That is rigid containers, semi-rigid containers, and flexible containers. So in the case of rigid containers, there are two materials that is popularly used. One is glass jars or glass containers, and metal cans, so metal containers. In the case of metal cans, there are three major type of metals that is currently being used for making cans. One is tin-free steel cans, or in short form we call it as TFS. And another is the like old tin cans. It has been used for canning technology since its inception. So tin cans, tin-free steel cans, and then aluminum cans. These are the metal materials that is used for can making. So in the case of flexible pouches or flexible containers, it is a retort pouch that is very frequently used for canning purposes. In the case of retort pouch is basically a multi-laminate pouch. So in the retort pouch, there are two types of varieties that we found. One is opaque retort pouches, and one is see-through retort pouch, and that is one category. And another category is semi-rigid containers. Semi-rigid containers, it comes under this particular category. Two types of materials are usually used. One is thermoform trays, that is high impact polystyrene or such kind of materials. So HPP or high impact polypropylene, like different kinds of specialized polymers are used for, and it is thermally formed into different shapes of containers. So such containers are called thermoform trays. So thermoform trays are one kind of container that is used, and another one is Tetra Pak. Tetra Pak is basically used in aseptic canning technology. It is one of the different process of pasteurization. So the Tetra Pak contains different layers of papers, aluminum foils, and plastic. This is basically the classification of different kinds of containers that could be used for canning technology. Glass is one of the primitive or one of the primary materials initially used for when the canning technology was developed. So you may remember in the previous session we discussed about the historical development of canning technology. In that, in the 1800s or the late 1800s, it was the Nicholas Appert who invented the canning technology. He actually used the glass jars for developing the technology. So glass jars is particularly the first material, or it may be considered as the first packaging material that is used while developing canning process. Still, glass jars is used widely throughout the world, especially now the application is limited in the case of home canning purposes. So what is glass means? Glass is basically it's a non-crystalline amorphous solid, and basically the pure form of glass, or the basic material, or more than 70% of the glass is silicon dioxide or silica, or it is also known as quartz sand. So based on the quality of the silica or silicon dioxide, the quality of the glass jar is considered, also termed as fused quartz or fused silica, because we are using a thermal fusing technology to make it into an amorphous solid. So basically silicon dioxide is the purest form of glass. The properties that we are looking in the case of glass containers is that it should be highly resistant to thermal shock. So in the case of thermal processing, it is one of the key features that we look. So the glass should withstand the thermal processing. So basically, thermal processing are actually involved with different alternative cycles of expansion and contraction. So the material is going to expand when it is heated, and it is going to contract when it is cooled, or shrink when it is cooled. Since the normal glass is very brittle, if it is subjected to this kind of expansion and contractions, there is higher chance that it may break. So that should be avoided. So the material that we are going to use for glass containers, especially for thermal processing, should be able to withstand resistant to thermal shock. And so different kinds of purposes it can be used. So such materials are generally used for lab purposes, and also there are different materials. This kind of glasses materials are used for optical fibers, which is resistant to thermal shock. And also certain glasses are there which have high melting point. So this glasses with high melting points are used in halogen lamps, And especially in spacecrafts also, high melting point glasses are used even in spacecrafts, because it should be withstand high temperatures. It should not melt under normal temperatures. So there are different kinds of materials, that additives that we add in the process of making, other than silicon dioxide. For example, is soda lime is one material. There is sodium carbonate with the chemical formula Na2CO3. So it is one of the premium material, or one of the fine material that is used. But the drawback of silica soda lime is basically it has low melting temperature. So it is normally used in the case of normal glassware that we use in day to day purposes or day to day life. So soda lime is added at different concentrations, or sodium oxide can be as added, or lime can be added, calcium oxide can be added, then a little bit amount of magnesia, alumina. So all these materials are added to prepare this particular soda lime, and 75% of the glass will be basically silica. Along with silica, other materials like so the soda lime and magnesia, alumina, etc. are added. So to prepare this particular kind of glass material with a lower melting point. And also another type of glass is there, borosilicate, which is called borosilicate, which is basically 5 to 15 percentage of boron trioxide, B2O3 is added. So the main property of this borosilicate glass is basically it has high thermal resistance. So especially the lab glassware and also the glass used for thermal processing is basically made with borosilicate. That is one material. And also another material is alumina silicate, where 5 to 10 percentage of aluminum oxide is added, or alumina is added. So they are thermal resistance, but it is very difficult to melt. They are having very high melting point. So that is why they are popularly used in the preparation of fiberglass. So this alumina is, or alumina silicate is basically used in the preparation of like a fiberglass material. Borosilicate is used for the preparation of thermal tolerant glass materials, for example, glasswares and canning jars. And also soda lime is used for other kind of general use of general glass material. And there are certain popular glass jar sizes that is used for canning, that like different kinds of like 32 ounce which is called quint, and 16 ounce which is called pint, and 8 ounces half pint, 4 ounces which is quarter pint. These are the basic size groups of glass jar that is used for canning technology. So 32 ounce will be around, in the case of ml, it is around almost 1 liter 946 ml, like 473 ml, like different kinds of quantities are there. So these are the general glass jar sizes that is used for canning. These four sizes: 32 ounces, 16 ounces, 8 ounces, and 4 ounces. That was about glass containers. Now, the next category in the case of rigid containers is metal cans. So metal cans are the most widely used material for canning. If you see, like the canning product, the market of the canning product, the largest number of materials. Now, slowly this flexible packaging is catching up. But historically, if you see, the metal cans were the maximum use for the production of canned products. So, what are the advantages of metal cans? Metal cans are basically 100% recyclable and can be recycled infinitely with no loss of quality. So, it is infinitely recyclable. The metal cans, the advantage of metal cans, whatever be the metal that we use, whether it may be tin coated steel or tin free steel or aluminum cans, all these metal cans can be almost 100% recyclable. So, once you prepare a metal container, that metal can after the use of the food product can be recycled and made into further different cans without compromising the quality of the container. So that is one of the very important property of metal containers. And then also metal cans are most recycled food and beverage containers in the world. So that is one of the characteristics of the metal can because of this property, obviously. And also cans have the highest scrap value because it is also economical for recycling the metal containers. Highest scrap value, and also because of this highest scrap value, it will subsidize the collection and recycling of other materials. So basically, the metal containers are actually supporting the recycling industry. It has a very good scrap value. So because of the metal containers, only the recycling industry is surviving. Because if you see the other materials like semi-rigid containers or basically plastics or paper, they have very minimum scrap value. So the recycling industry cannot survive by only by recycling plastic containers, because plastic containers cannot be infinitely used, because food containers, if one recycled, cannot be reused for food purposes. It has to be reused for non-food purposes. And as the recycling, the term of the recycling increases, the usage also very narrows down. So that is one of the drawbacks of other kind of material. But the metal cans are, what happens is that without compromising the quality, The basically recycled food can, even after recycling also it can be used for preparation of food cans. So that is one of the advantage. And also cans are recycled through a well-established and efficient infrastructure, because metal recycling is a very established infrastructure currently in the industry. So that is also advantages. And also cans can be recycled and returned to a store shelf as new can in just 60 days, because the time period required for recycling is also very short compared to other materials. Within 60 days, a can be recycled and brought as a new can into the store. So that is one of the important property of metal containers. And cans are also, they have stackable and high cubic efficiency, making them cost effective for transportation, because the stackability of the metal containers are very important, because unlike the plastic containers, it is rigid. Since it is a rigid container, if you design it, like carefully, like that is why it is the most of the cans are cylindrical. Why most of the cans are cylindrical, not made into other shapes, are because cylindrical shape will support more number of cans per square meter area. So that is why cylinder is one of the efficient material when in the case of packaging. So in a given square meter area, more number of cans can be stacked, can be paletted, or can be arranged, can be organized if it is in cylinder shape. So compared to other metal containers, since the cans are, most of the cans, food cans are in cylinder shape, more containers can be packed per surface area. And also small area, more cans means more containers can be transported. And also the advantages are metal cans are lightweight, because the thickness of the metal container walls can be minimized. Like most of the beverage cans, the thickness is very minimum. Like it is the thickness of the any beverage can wall is almost similar to the human hair thickness. It is thin as a human hair. Even though the thickness is very less, it will not compromise the physical strength. That is the advantage. Using minimum material, we can produce a maximum container with a maximum physical strength. So that is one of the advantages, because cans are lightweight, they are unbreakable, they are physically strong, and provide superior protection to the product. That is also very important. Why metal cans are very important to the thermal processing process is that they can go through this heating and cooling cycle very fast because of the conduction or the thermal transfer. So since the metals are a very good conductor, what happens is that it can go through the thermal cycles of heating and cooling cycles very fast. So basically the processing is very fast. If you consider some general facts that we already discussed, that 100% of the metal cans are infinitely recyclable. That is one of the key features. And cans are about 69, they are number one recycled beverage container in the world, because 69% of the beverage containers are recycled. So that is one of the higher point. And aluminum cans, especially 95% of aluminum cans are recyclable. So whatever the aluminum cans we find it, because we need not produce more metals or more metal aluminum cans, because 95% of the cans are coming as new containers. So that also reduces the stress on the manufacturing industry. Another feature of the metal containers, other than 100% recyclability, is that these metal containers are particularly the steel and aluminum metals are particularly easy to collect from waste, because they are highly distinguishable. Then even in a very multi, like, or composite waste, you can use a magnet or similar kinds of identification technologies can be used. And even from a mixed waste, comparatively easy to collect and segregate this kind of materials, metal containers. That is one of the properties. And it has been already, we discussed that around 70% of aluminum cans and around 68% of steel cans are recycled throughout the world. That means around 75% of aluminum and around 80 to 90% of the steel, which is ever produced in the world, are still in the use, because of this 100% recyclability. Around 75% of aluminum as well as 80 to 90% of steel, which has been ever used for preparation of canned, are still in use. So it particularly decreases the pressure in the utilization of different kinds of metal producing sources like iron ore, different kinds of ores that we use for preparing different kinds of metals. So this kind of recyclability is very important, and we also discussed that within the short period of time, the time span of recyclability of metal containers is very short. It is around 60 days. And also we discussed about high scrap value. In the case of scrap value, it is around 8 times than polyethylene terephthalate, which is the most common packaging material or plastic packaging material that is used throughout the world. PET is called PET, or polyethylene terephthalate. So it is 8 times, the metals have 8 times more scrap value than PET, and also 4 times than paper. And also, you know that glass basically does not have any scrap value, because it should be melted. We want to recycle the glass, you cannot make as such. We had to melt it and again complete recycle the process. The glass is basically very difficult to recycle. So that is why the glass does not have any scrap value. In the case of scrap value, also metals on a higher note. And also this high recycling capacity or this recycling reduces energy of metal production. 74 percentage of energy required for metal production is reduced by because of this recyclability. Almost 95 percentage of energy reduction in the production of aluminum. So in the case of steel, we use iron ore as far as the basic material, and in the case of aluminum, we use bauxite. So this kind of recyclable capacity of these both metals will reduce pressure over the metallic ore resources of the world.
Thank you.